Testing, 1, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. How are you doing this evening? Thanks so much for joining us. The interesting thing is some weeks I don't always have a topic planned out, and sometimes I kind of go, let's go fishing and kind of talk about whatever it is that's kind of happening in the moment in my life. So I am in gear demo mode. I'm in being asked lots of questions about gear of certain amps that I'm posting pictures of. And so what I really wanted to do was, first of all, be of service to people, because every so often I'm just going to open it up for questions. And I've had a lot of questions come in about picking amps, what's the right amp, what's the right criteria, setting up a rig. And because I'm in gear demo mode right now, I am fixated on not just the gear itself, but how to apply it and how to use it. So the demo part of this, whether it's doing video demos, whether it's doing live streams, whether it's demoing songs for an album, or whatever it is that you may be doing, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, and how we cobble all these pieces together. And the interesting thing about being in this particular mode and kind of working with the gear and massaging and cobbling the pieces together. What do you mean the event ended? Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Facebook just kind of took a dump on me. Hang on a second. Let's take a look at what's going on over there. Just 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Hang on. Just 1 sec. That's what happened with Facebook. That's really weird. Okay, let's go back. Absolutely bizarre. For those of you that are on YouTube, we're restarting Facebook. For no particular reason, it just decided to take a giant le poo-poo, but we've solved that problem. So with that said, you never quite know what's going to happen with all of this stuff. Let me make sure I'm refreshing the right browser. As I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted. For some reason, Facebook just decided it wasn't going to stream. So we are back. Thank you for rejoining the stream, and those of you that were already on YouTube, thanks for hanging out. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I may want to recheck that. Thank you very much, Rich Doyle. You are a friend and a scholar and a gentleman. Okay, so with that said, yes, I am good here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So I've learned a thing or two in the midst of all of this. All right, so you know what? That's going to go into our first little kind of grab bag here. First of all, if everybody that's kind of jumped in here, I need to do one last thing over here. And there we go, and boom. All right, so in the years of being out on the road as a touring musician, one of the things that I always kind of had was this concept of a hot swappable backup. Because if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong at the least possible opportune moment. It's one of the great things about live streaming. It's like there's always something that's kind of blowing up in the moment. That's great. So in the process of that, one of the things that I want to just give you guys an idea about, Jeffrey Scott, how are you? First of all, now that we've got everybody tuning in here and everything seems to be up and running and Facebook is not taking a le poo-poo on us, do me a favor. Chime in, let me know where you're coming from, and if you would be so kind, with 3 question marks in front and after, feed me some questions, because really, again, before we were so rudely interrupted, tonight is about talking about the perspective of kind of where I'm at, where I'm demoing gear. There's a bunch of stuff that's about to happen that I can't talk about in the live stream space. And so I'm deeply immersed in the gear world and presentation and demoing, which means that I'm kind of making little mini albums is really what it is. And I think a huge number of you are immersed in the recording process. So the idea of kind of what do you do, first of all, backing up your data, what do you do when, a mic goes out? Well, if you're dependent on one microphone, you better have 2 of them. All these things that you want to do in preparation. So do me a favor, hit me with your questions if you've got them. So Michael Mazzone, how you doing? Good to see you. Thank you so much. And let's see here. Jay, how's it going? This is Spence. Awesome. Thanks so much. Bradley, hello. G-Man, what's going on? Kurt, hello. Chris Alexander, what's going on? Long time no see. Everything is going quite well. Thank you very much. Awesome. And yes. Jeffrey Scott, love you to death. And Michael, boy, you're Okay, there we go. Oh, we're chiming in from, that's right. We're chiming in from both. What it is that I actually have the ability, depending on which stream I'm doing. Chris Stark, Michael Brock, how you guys doing? Depending on what stream I'm on, sometimes all the comments come through into Restream, and into that in turn feeds into Ecamm Live, and sometimes it doesn't. San Luis Obispo. Oh, but we met in Santa Rosa. Hang on, let's pull this up. Awesome. Okay. Kurt Pleasure. So, here's an interesting thing, is if we met in Santa Rosa, that would have been on one of the Michael Schenker gigs. So, again, on the topic of playing out live, when we get back to playing out live, I always bring not only a primary instrument, but I almost always try and have a hot, swappable backup that is as identical to the main guitar that I've got as possible. The same thing holds true with a head, and that can be expensive to take around with you, but it will save your posterior in an awkward situation. Okay, awesome. Bill, with great pleasure, thank you. So here's the thing, folks, love you to death. Absolutely love you to death. And I love you even more if you pepper me with questions, because I got plenty to talk about, but what I really want to talk about is what's on your mind. So here's the thing. Preparing your musical ideas. So the little ditty that I was playing there at the top, and I think most of that would have streamed through, is a composition that I'm working on that's basically the basis of a demo that I'm doing for Tech 21. And the neat thing about that process is that it got me placing microphones, it got me layering guitar tones and bass tones, and, without mentioning any, what about a digital backup plan? Absolutely. So let me not rabbit trail that thought yet. Oh, fine. I'm in. So I'm a Dropboxer. I have approximately 7 terabytes of data in the cloud. Now, there are those. What's going on, Paul? Good to see you. There we go. That's going to be our first golden question of the night. And boy, are we going to have fun with that. Kurt, thank you. I will take that bait in just one moment. Okay. Good. Here we go. Good. Bring it on. I love it. Boom. Right back at you in a moment. So here's the thing, is in the process of doing all this stuff, one of the folks that's on the feed tonight, I was privileged enough to be on kind of a closed Facebook Messenger thing around kind of cobbling mixes together and how you make all these things fit. And I literally have spent 3 days cobbling. And, it's not always easy, but I learned and relearned a few things. Generally speaking, if you start with your guitar, that's a terrible place to start. I would strongly suggest starting with your drums and your bass. And I'll go a step further. Most of the time, I will track the bass just with the click. That enables me to not be thinking about where my accents in terms of kick drums are going to be, generally speaking. Now, that said, I will usually track whatever scratch guitar part I'm going to put, but it's a tangled web, but let me kind of finesse and untangle some of the pieces. The last demo that I made a mistake that I've made thousands of times, and I'm sure some of you have made it as many times as I have, where you go to lay a scratch part, and you kind of unplug some stuff, and then you're listening back and you go, that was the take. My new demo thing is basically I videotape the actual performances and then stitch them together in Premiere. I shoot them in Ecamm Live in 4K. I've got 2 computers that I'm recording that into. I basically use that to line it up on the timeline in Premiere. I'm recording the actual audio in Pro Tools. I sync that up, boom. And I can kind of make my cuts and make it interesting. The other thing that I'm not doing these days, I'm not cutting on the beginning of a section like dun, 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 edit. I'm kind of like setting stuff up, and I'm really enjoying that. In fact, I will say this, the thing that I'm enjoying is I'm trying to do things differently than I've done them before. And I'm a bit of a process guy, except for when I'm not. But most of the time, I kind of like have my steps in my order. Getting back to the steps in order of the demo world. The bass part, once you have a great bass tone, it allows you to make a bunch of much more intelligent decisions. And generally speaking, records for real, back in the day when we made records, we would go in, you'd cut your basics, your drums and your bass. Once you had rock solid tones there, then everything else would be put together to complement that. Sometimes you might reamp the bass if you want to have like an SVT or use the Sans amp or something, right? But the idea is once you've got a great bass tone locked, you're there. So on this particular set of demos, what you heard me playing over the top there, I made the mistake, although it was a logical mistake to make, was I really, in the process of doing these Tech 21 demos for the Power Engine Deuce Deluxe, basically it's a powered speaker system for modelers, amongst other things. So the idea was I wanted to try as many different types of things, conventional and non-conventional. And the rhythm track, hey, what's going on, Andy Martin? Good to see you, my friend. There we go. Ron, absolutely. Thanks so much. I feel you. Gotta love these guitars. As I was saying before I interrupted myself, the idea of creating a rhythm guitar part first, that is on one side an acoustic guitar, and on the other side is an electric guitar running into each of these two guys, utilizing the two outputs on the guitar here, the PRS SE Hollow Body 2 Piezo. I really wanted to do that to show what the Power Engine Deuce Deluxe could do by kind of taking some of the less obvious things, because those of us that actually use a piezo and a traditional magnetic at the same time, it's really nice to be able to separate them out. That's why there are separate outputs there. The challenge, of course, is that amplifying all that business can be rough, and so I made the mistake of committing to the parts, and it's drop D. I don't know about you guys, but I'm an intonation nut, and playing stuff, especially when I'm doing stuff over the top of the neck with the thumb, getting the intonation right on drop D is nuts. So once I had the part, I kind of went, well, I'm going to add the bass afterwards. And I was like, oh, what a mistake. I spent a day moving mics, retracking the bass, getting the tone right. And then finally what I did was like, wait a second. I'm going to do the Doug Pinnick, Billy Sheehan thing. I've got two different amps. I've got one that's basically the direct signal going to one amp. I've got the Sans amp going out to the other. The Sans amp's got a parallel output that gave me the opportunity to split it back there. And I actually did something I have never done. I put treated bass on one side, that is to say with the Sans amp, and I put the DI bass on the other. The bass is panned hard left and hard right, and I love it. So, you know, the great thing is being creative in the studio. Our favorite records weren't made because people went, we're doing the cookie cutter thing again, let's make cookies, there's a recipe, as opposed to people who just kind of went, let's try something and see what happens. And as an end result, I think I ended up with something that was better. I wasted a day, quote unquote, of relearning the facts, like, just start with the bass, numbnuts. But I learned something, and more importantly, you can learn from my day well spent. Now, the neat thing is I got further immersed. I made some different decisions about what I was going to do in terms of the bass, and I ended up with something that I wouldn't have ended up with otherwise. So that said, the little melody business here, let me mute the mic. Love that. So that is a patch, and it's so funny using the unexpected, because originally when I started noodling over the top of this, I was using a much higher gain sound. And last night on the Worship Guitar Show, I had my friends from Worship Tutorials on. They have just celebrated their 100th Helix patch download. 100,000 patches. And so I just happened to have this up with a Telecaster last night, and I went, well, let me see what this sounds like over this track. And I kind of went into the different snapshots, and I ended up on this one. And I was like, I literally didn't touch anything. I was like, oh, that only happens like once in a lifetime, right? So, and the neat thing is just kind of, again, experimenting. I was like, I'll try it. And I'm super happy with the results. And it just, with this guitar, you know, that patch it's an AC30. Like, I would never, quote unquote, have used that as my first choice. And I'm so happy that I did. And, you know, the great thing is it's got kind of that Neil Sean-y kind of a vibe. And I'm, you know, a Neil Sean fanatic. So, There we go. Start with the bass. Words of stupidity, not words of wisdom, but thank you very much. Jeffrey B. Scott. There we go. So the thing is, oh, I'm peeking a little bit. Hold on. Peeking bad. Peeking bad. Watch that meter there, Doppler. Okay. Hello, Cy. How are you? Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so let's see this thing. So let's get back to, there we go. Okay, so this question from Kurt, really great question. There is a stream for a company whose name I can't mention on a topic I can't mention, other than to say that there are amps and modeling and IRs involved, and that's all I can say. But it may be the most crazy, insane project that I've ever been involved in, and that tops Guitar Hero because of what it is that we're potentially planning to do, and I'm so excited about that. Most importantly, it's about serving people. It's about you, is ultimately what comes down to. So the short version is that we live in a time where guys like myself grew up playing with a guitar going into an amplifier. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cue a demo here. You guys might have heard this before, but this is, to me, the essence of what that experience is about. I did this for the Fender demo. This is the essence, to me, about what playing a great sounding guitar straight into a tube amp is all about. Okay, so that is the Princeton Reverb hand-wired Reissue. I plugged into that amp and I was like, it's that one of those things that when you play it, it takes your breath away. And when it came time to return that amplifier, I was like, there's no way that thing's leaving this room. So that's now my amplifier. And so the thing is that there's a relationship that happens and an experience that you have as a player that transcends the concept of just gear, and all of a sudden it's like a horse. You get on the horse and it takes you someplace that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and you learn something in the process of that. And there is something that can only happen. I said it can only happen when you plug a guitar straight into a tube amplifier. It's what modeling devices model. Hello. And there's nothing wrong with modeling as demonstrated by this. So the thing is that what happens in a tube amp experience, the conversation I had earlier tonight was about a couple of my favorite and not as favorite amplifiers. Favorite, Fender Pro Reverb, the most underrated, unknown gem in the vintage Fender blackface line. It's over on the other side of the room. It's on loan from my buddy Chris Lewis. It is, any of you that were at the last G4 experience in Carmel, that was the amp that Tommy Emmanuel was destroying in a good way, and it just like, that amp is magic. And it is a 40 watt amplifier. It's two 12s. It's like a tame version of a twin reverb, and that amp is, like, how do I say this? Real amp guys know about that amp. Nothing wrong with not being a real amp guy. So let me be really clear. Not cork sniffing. I'm not down with that thing. But it's just not that well known an amp, unfortunately. So the point being is that little Princeton's got a single 10. I was like, oh, it'll be cool. And I plugged into it. I'm like, it's just one of those things that takes your breath away. And what happens is, as a player, I learned a lot about myself playing one. My buddy Scott House had a Telly. It wasn't a Deluxe, but it was with a Bigsby, and I was playing into the guy from Chicago, a 2112. I'm gonna forget the name of it, but it's a Tweed, and that's that's where I kind of learned the telly thing, where you're just going straight into the amplifier. There's no hiding. It's a tweed, so it's a fast amp. There's not a lot of compression, but you learn something about the guitar, and as a player, you learn basically one of the things that we'll probably talk a little bit about tonight is drum groove. I'm going to leave this up so people actually know what I'm talking about. Where with a drum groove, and this is when Atma and I were working together, this is something that he was doing with Richie Kotzen, Atma Noor, that is, the drummer, played on a bazillion shrapnel records, where we would pull the snare back and we would move it in different sections of the song. And basically different tube amps have a certain amount of compression that happens naturally. And tweeds are very tight amps. They're very fast. So the black faces have a tendency to have more give. So you get a little extra, more cushion out of it. It's just a different amp experience. And what happens is you learn as a player how to respond to that. Generally speaking, modeling kind of has a little bit of the squishiness, but it doesn't move from model to model. The tweeds don't have a tendency to behave the same way, being as fast as they are in real life. Nothing wrong with that. Makes it a little bit easier to play. It's nice to have the tweed sound without having to quite work so hard. But it's a different experience. And the convenience, and I will say this, I've actually, for these demos, when I've got mics up in the room, I put these on. And I loathe putting these in my ears. I loathe headphones. I just want to hear the amp in the room. I want to respond to what the guitar and the amplifier are saying to each other. And that's part of the experience for me. One of the reasons I love modeling, Kurt, is that I love being able to have the click. And I'm a click guy. Like, give me the click. I'll have it even up with the drum machine or, Easy Drummer, such that I'm, in parts where the drums go away. I'm all about the click, and quite often, as I mentioned before, I'll lay some basics down before I actually lay a drum part because I don't want to be influenced by a kick drum pattern that is not the right kick drum pattern. And in turn, the great thing about Easy Drummer is that there are actually real drum performances where the snare is pulled back to a certain place, and it may not be exactly where I want the groove to sit. One of the things I love about Easy Drummer is that it does give you the ability to kind of find a pocket, but that kind of gets baked into your track, and there are times I just want to put the click up, I want to own the time, I want to sit exactly where I want to sit in the time. So the whole thing about plug-in versus amp, and I'm going to throw the modeling stuff in with the plug-in. There was a great live stream today with Corey Wong, who I have invited. I probably shouldn't have said that. Well, it's already out now. I invited onto the show. I don't know if he's going to be able to have time to do it, but he's somebody that is a brilliant player. I'm hugely influenced by his take on funk, and he's got a Neural DSP plugin out, and so hopefully he'll be able to come on the show. I'd really love that. And he was talking about bass. So it was a whole live stream about him tracking bass, which is near and dear to my heart. Because when you've got a great bass track, all of a sudden everything flows from there. And that's one of the great things about laying your click, having that bass track have a great bass tone, feel great, and then the rest of the house is nice and firm and on foundation. It also gives you a checkpoint for your guitars, especially if you're in drop D and you're doing the thumb over the top of the neck thing. Gives you a checkpoint for your intonation. And I love drop D, but I hate playing in the studio in drop D because I'm so anal about intonation. It's very, very hard for me to get it to where I want it to be. But that's just me. So with the plugins thing, first of all, the Neural DSP stuff is great. Helix native plugin is great. And, all the stuff that Miko is doing, the fluff stuff. And, again, all this kind of the digital stuff, I think it's great. And I think there's a time and a place for all of it. And I love being able to mix and match it. And I love that we're in an era where we do get a chance to mix that up. So that's a great question. Paul, what's going on? Look at you. Thank you, my man. Good to see you. Okay, so let's see. All right. So here we go. Bradley. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Sacramento. Met you at a Shaker show in Santa Rosa. Come on. Fist bump Shaker shows. Come on. Awesome. So how do you like your Helix? 4-cable method, FR, direct. Okay. So I love it all. And the thing that is really neat, the last demo that I did was, I actually have yet, I think, to post it on the Doug Doppler page, but was for worship musician on the Rev D20. I'm going to do a mainstream D20 demo, but one of my favorite tones was the Helix into the power amp return of the D20, and then using the built-in 2 notes torpedo to come direct out into Pro Tools. Like, the sound was so clear and crisp, but what I was able to do was leverage the 2 power amp section. And so that is to say, the phone call that I had with the unnamed person from the unnamed company earlier today was basically, I'm a tube amp and amp format finagler. I like to try and figure out all the ways that I can plug stuff in. So to answer your question, I love FR. I love, first of all, being able to go straight into the studio monitor, straight into the PA. I mean, it's just like, it's so great. I was thinking about one of the Schenker shows I think it was at the House of Blues in Dallas. And I remember, and I can't go into the specifics of kind of the conversation I had this afternoon yet, but we were talking about being on stage and amps and cabinets and wedges and whatnot. And I just remember somehow between sound check and my actual set, I'm like, it's just one of those things, like, that mic got moved. And sure enough, I look back there and, like, the speakers here, you basically have your dust cap, and generally with the aid of something like this, when it works. Of course, these never work, so you have to give it the tap, by the way. It's usually never the batteries. But you shine it through the grill cloth. You see the dust cap. Generally, you start at the edge of the dust cap, about an inch and a half away. In a live setting, closer to an inch. Actually, in a live setting, I usually put it right on the edge of the grill because there's just so much stuff going on. That way, you can look at it and you go, hasn't been moved, right? Because that will change everything front of house. And I'm back there, and I look over, and I can tell that this thing's somehow been placed right smack in the center of the dust cap. So I just kind of ease my way back, and I'm playing, and I just use my leg and move that thing over until it was in the right spot. Because as soon as I stepped away from the back line, I'm getting the monitors, and I'm not going to have a conversation in the middle of the set with the monitor guys like, hey, can you pull 2K down because it's blowing my head off? I'm just like, I'm moving the mic. And it was an instant decision. But those sorts of informed decisions are very, very important, because when you're in a situation where you're dependent on the monitors, that's your, and the other thing is in a live situation, it's not just your ears that are hearing the monitors, it's the guitar. So, and this is, Joe Satriani flying in a Blue Dream is a perfect example. You'll watch him walk the stage and find the sweet spots and then turn his body and so on and so forth. There's different spots on the stage that have different frequency things going on. And so that's why what's happening in the monitors, of course, is so important. But when you're dealing with stuff, the words sustain a little bit of feedback. So that C up there wanted to take off a little bit. The other notes, and again, it's a pretty low gain setting, but you'll find the notes that, they want to resonate. And even just playing through monitors here, I should say studio monitors here, you'll find that you have a platform to do that in. So I love it all. And, kind of the neat thing about the Tech 21 Power Engine Deluxe, I literally got the start of my gear video demo stuff working for Tech 21. And I got hired to do, I think, 5 different types of modelers into the Power Engine 60, which right now what I've done is on the Power Engine 60s, I've got a pair of them. I've swapped out the speakers that were Celestion 80s, and what I've got in there now is the Celestion F12 X200s, which are their full-range live response speakers specifically made for modeling. So I'm going to be spending a bunch of time with those coming up. So super excited about that. Bradley, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And good to see you again. All right, you said ask questions. Okay, good. Oh, look at this. Richard Dorr, one of my favorite human beings ever. Okay, many folks will say streaming and vids and sharing your thing, you'll never be ready, just do it. Thoughts and guidance on building up to taking the leap? That's a great question. Okay, first of all, I got asked, I'm going to be doing a live stream on Monday for somebody associated with the Ecamm Live community. and I'll post. I don't know when the live stream is going to happen, or it's a video interview that I don't know. I don't know. As I know more when it's going to go live, it's So one of the questions on the questionnaire was very clever how they set it up, because they gave themselves lots of material to come into the live stream with me to ask based on a bunch of form questions. Very clever, because everybody's responses are going to be different. So if you kind of pick through the bones, you can ask different questions based on the same original question. Very clever. So the thing is that when are you ready? The funny thing is that having hung up on Joe Satriani, having not been able to connect YouTube with John Petrucci, and having had new loopbacks and echoes, and the fact that Facebook, for whatever reason, and there's no rhyme or reason, when I go to restream to Facebook, when the stream launches, it goes to a private stream. There's no setting. It's just like, it just does it. So I have a separate monitor set up. Everything's groovy until Facebook decides to stop streaming. Who knows? So the point being, what I suggested was this. Do a private stream. So don't put anybody on there. Or maybe what I did a couple of times, my buddy Andrew Monica, who is kind of in the mix of some of the stuff that's going on here in the background here. I would just have him on there, whether he was actually tuned in or not. He would see when I could go live. So the neat thing about the psychology of that is I wouldn't always tell him I was going live, but I knew that somebody could see that I was going to go live. So it meant that although it was, it would have been friendly fire, and it often was, especially in the early days, I had the idea that there was a possibility that somebody was actually going to be watching, which is really good psychologically, because you just hold yourself a little bit differently. You just know that the camera is actually projecting to somebody, and one is a guitar player, you don't really want to suck. And I'll go first person. Like that melody I wrote today, I was I don't know how else to say it. I don't know if fear is quite the right word, but if I were to talk about the pure emotion, the raw, it's in a jar with a label on it, the emotion is fear that I'm going to blow the melody or forget it, because it's something that I wrote in a period of time. I recorded a version of it until I actually get it up and running here. That's the scratch version, but the scratch version ended up being really close to what I want. I was like, oh, that feels really nice. Intonation's not perfect, spot down at the bottom of the neck. I broke a string 5 minutes before the stream was supposed to start, which is why, changing strings, being prepared, all of that stuff. So the point being, per your question, the fear that you're going to fall on your face is one of the things about live streaming that I don't know if that will be gone a year from now. For me, and I host 2 streaming shows back to back, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I'm a pretty, how do I say this without sounding like an idiot? I'm a pretty confident guy. That is to say, I'm not a cocky guy. I'm not down with that, but I'm not a person that really kind of, I don't live in the realm of self-doubt. Most of the time, I'm inventing things, and the next plan, that most of the time these days I get a chance to actually do that. So because of that, there is this thought sometimes that, what if this is the time that it crashes and burns? And honestly, Richard, it's a great question. So the same thing holds true at like the guitar camps, which is where we met. So at when I sit in with Joe and he invites me to sit in, every time, and I don't care, that voice. And here's the thing, as I've talked about it before, I just turn the volume knob off, but it's going, it could be tonight. They'll all know that you're really just, that it's tonight you're going to crash and burn. They're going to really know that you're actually a fraud. And I'm just like, and it just goes. And I'm just like, I'm turning it down. It's back there going. And fortunately, I've gotten good enough to have that voice going in the background and just like, I'm here to have a good time. I'm here because people want to see me have a good time and play well. And Joe wants me to play well because it makes him look good because I'm one of his old students. And, and I practiced a bunch, so I go into those events prepared. Tonight was interesting because I didn't have a huge amount of practice time. I ran through that piece a couple of times beforehand, and what I do, other great advice, and I'm sorry I'm rabbit trailing, but it's such a great question. I record in Ecamm Live. We talked about this before. And I recorded a take of that to just make sure the balance was pretty good. But I could also hear when I overplayed, I'm like, oh, note to self, don't do that. And so you kind of begin to kind of go, oh, this is how I'm going to approach it. So one, what I just kind of did the reveal there is having a little bit of a strategy. Actually, a lot of a strategy to a certain extent. What I love about live streams is that they're live, and it's actually, again, one of the questionnaires, one of the questions of the questionnaire was kind of like, what do you like about live stream? And I was like, it's a great question. I like the fact that it's live, it's without a net, but it's also very personal. I mean, that's one of the things that my wife, Melissa, that's totally awkward. Melissa, my wife, she's really been on me about, you gotta not, because I used to script stuff when we did the old Orange videos, and I would do this thing where I would finish the end of a phrase and I go, and do this thing with my eyebrows, and she's like, can't you just talk to the camera like you're talking to a normal person? So now that's one of my favorite things about this. I feel I know I'm staring at a lens, but I know I'm actually looking you in the eye. And that's one of my favorite things. I love that. And so it means that I have a chance to live, and this is the most valuable part, Richard. You're a super smart guy. This keeps me living in a place of overflow. When I live in a place where I have to give out at the end of crazy work weeks and crazy days and lots of responsibility, but I have to save a nice chunk of my heart, passion, and emotion and musicality for you, that keeps me in a place of abundance and overflow. That is a tremendously healthy place to live as a musician, as a creative, as an artist, and that is one of the great things about this. So the idea of going live, having strategy of going, hey, you know what? Let me do some test streams. Have a couple of people that I kind of, you can, in the settings there, you can invite a couple of people when it's just friends, and also just doing some dry runs without any friends invited. So you just get a chance to watch back from Facebook. There's something different than recording it locally. So when you're watching back off Facebook, you're now in the idiom, right? And that just, you're seeing it framed in a different way than you're seeing it on your computer, because it's just a different process. And so, the just do it part, having, again, hung up on Joe Satriani on Skype in the first live stream. Fortunately, he did call back. And you guys don't know the other one. So actually, I officially have closed the Doug Doppler, Doppler's Gear Garage Facebook group, because I'm going to take this page from being a personal page. I'm going to turn it into an artist page. It's just easier that way. Facebook's going to tax me to reach this audience, but I'm okay with that. I talked about it last week, and I was like, I felt convicted. I'm like, I need to do the right thing here. So, and it's cool. And actually, I've had a huge privilege with Facebook, so I'm just like, this is totally cool. So with that said, Facebook is a great platform to be able to do certain things. One of the things that you can't do with a personal page is you can't boost a post. The other thing that you don't get is the ability to edit a video. So say, for example, you want to take the countdown out of the top of the video. That's one of the things you are able to do with a kind of a business page or an artist page. You can do it with a business page, and I'm 90% positive you can do it with an artist page, but I'll need to double check that. So the point being is that then, you just kind of begin to watch yourself. What did I do well? And I'll say this last tip before I move on. As we've talked about a lot, one of the things that I do once a month or so is I hop on and I just solo for an hour nonstop. One, it's important, as Melissa says, you gotta play for people. They have to think of you as a guitar player. You cannot spend too much time as a host personality and let people forget the fact that you play the guitar. And that's really wise counsel. So because of that, those are really good opportunities for me to just go on. And I'm always pretty much terrified when I do it. But at the same time, I'm just like, I have to break through that fear. And because, the idea is the night I, get on and I hit 5 million bad notes. The goal of those is to basically solo for an hour and not repeat verbatim any ideas. And that really, that kind of grew out of, again, your question. Like, I just got on and I started doing it. I just kind of went, well, I'm going to be warmed up. I'm going to feel prepared as I can. But I know, first of all, early days, the audio and the video were out of sync, and the audio sucked because I didn't know how to get good sound and blah, blah, blah. It was bad. But that got me ready to be good. And the only way you can learn to get good, and at least I'm getting good, whatever, is by being bad. Like, you got to start bad. Because what's neat is you can kind of go, cool, I figured this thing out. So the idea of using those hour-long jams, and key for me, and as I share with my students, is that by learning that I can solo for an hour without repeating, or just going back to the same spot. Like the one thing I did in the one live stream, I kept coming back to, pattern number 1 of the pentatonic, starting at I think it was something in A or something, but I kept coming back there. And I did it like 3 times, maybe 4 times, but I was like, that was like 2 or 3 times too many for me, because I'm like, I'm not going to do that. The other thing is, the last time I did it, I went like, you know what? Because I banished sequences from my technique for a while because I was using them too much. Right around, again, you guys heard me blab about the Petrucci camp. I came into that camp, I was at that camp and I was going into that camp, and I realized I've been teaching the same curriculum, for 2 or 3 years, and I just kind of like, I got sick of myself, and I'm just like, you know what? That's not why these people are here. You need to go back and get to work. You need to find that inner Doppler that was the guy that when you were 18 was just ferocious, fearless. And I was like, I want to find that guy too. So I was like, you know what? I'm going back there. So the live streams gave me a chance to kind of find that part of myself again and go, I'm going to claim that back. Last time when I watch, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing sequences, because just like teaching out of curriculum as opposed to inventing new curriculum every week, what I try and do for you is that now I'm kind of like, I got new stuff to do, new ideas, but now I can go back and add the sequences. I went back and listened to the first record, and I'm like, there are some good sequences in there. So I am ripping myself off flagrantly, and I love it. Great question. Okie dokie. Oh, wow, totally called out. If a company sends you a product that you totally dislike, but they have other products you do like, do you have to be careful on what you say in its review? That's a great question. And I'm trying to think of different examples of where that has and has not been a problem. There's one pedal. I can only think of one piece of gear, besides every so often getting a guitar that wasn't set up properly. And that, without telling any specifics, is an awkward thing, because I'm thinking as a gear review. Sorry, I'm gonna open that up because it's a great question. So I want to speak to that because here's the thing: is that if I review something and I go, hey, this is good or this is great, and somebody goes out and buys it and has a bad experience, they don't blame fill in the blank company. They go, Doug is full of it, and at the point that people begin to go, hey, that guy cares more about his fancy pants gear relationships and his company relationships than he does about being faithful and ethical and honest to the people that are actually making it so he can do what he can do. That's time for me to pack up and just close the guitar case and just say, you know what, I'm going to go play golf or something. I cannot and will not be that guy. But it's a great question. So there's a guitar that is out at Gary Brower's being adjusted because I was like, I can't really play it. And I actually snapped photos of that guitar. I'm not going to mention the brand. And I ended up at a location with the senior vice president of that company. And I actually showed him the photos because I was like, you know what? I think you need to see this. And it's in no way slighting the people that are in the other part of that relationship. But I was like, because here's the thing. If it was getting to me like that, it's getting to you like that. And this is a company that cares. Everybody cares. For the most part, people really care. And so I needed him to see this because I'm like, hey, it came to me like that. It's like it puts me in a very awkward position, and it's important to let a company know. So to answer your question, I was just like, I couldn't review it, because A, it wasn't playable, and B, so it's now that particular instrument is now with Gary Brower, and kind of with all the shutdown, it's been with him for a minute, but In terms of a piece, there's only one thing that's come through here that I didn't like, and it was a pedal that I bought, and it was just crap. And I'm not going to mention the name of the pedal because that wouldn't be cool, because as you pointed out, that company actually has a bunch of other really cool gear, but that one pedal sucked. And another guitar player buddy of mine, whose name I won't mention, also agreed. It was just like, you just, every so often you plug into it and you're just like, no. All right. So, but you know, when stuff has come that wasn't right, that's a problem. And I think there's never been a time when I didn't get back with a company, and get back to them, because it's my responsibility. Because if I put my stamp of approval on it, I say I had a great experience on it, I better have. And if I didn't, then I shouldn't be reviewing it. It's a great question. Thank you, Chris. All right, so, okay. Yep. Thank you. That's the Worship Tutorials free AC30 patch. You can get it for free at worshiptutorials.com. Crazy sound. Hey, Ron, what's going on? Pleasure. I love your iconography there, by the way. So I'm waiting for the headrush stuff to show up. I have not tried it yet, to answer your question, but I've tried. Carlos Hernandez, my buddy. I got to tell you, Carlos, I've been thinking about you because one of the tones I've been trying to dial up is that original. So what Carlos and we've known each other forever. Actually, somewhere around here, I've got the little flyer for the gig that we did that Ivan has sponsored when you were doing Chemical. So I had that from the other night, and it's around here somewhere, but it's still nice and pristine. So Carlos Hernandez is a great guitar player, a great friend, and we've known each other forever. But one of the things is that when I made the first record, I had two of these EXIF. It was the funny thing is it was almost, well, no, it wasn't almost. It was a tube-powered modeling MIDI tube preamp. So it had one or two 12AX7s, but then the rest was a circuit board. And you would pop out the different modules. And that first rig sounded different. Even when I changed the preset, sent the presets over from the first unit to the second one, they just sounded different. But that first rig was some like Object to Be Destroyed, Yana's song, but that rig just had a different sound. It's a kind of combination of delay and reverb. So I've been trying to recreate that sound, just so you know. So I think about you all the time, my friend. And Carlos is a recent father and a lover of much gear. Hello, Bruce Adolph. Good to see you here. What's up, Tom? Lots of love in my heart for you. You know that, bro. Great to see you. Thanks so much. Okay, so Chris, I love recording DI because it enables me to make decisions about sim versus amp after the fact. But I always monitor with a tube amp during recording. Very interesting. All right, so Chris, I want to ask a question. So here's all right. This is a funny aside, but it's not that funny at all. All right, one of the things that you may have heard me mention last week or the week before, it's hot here in California. Unfortunately, I'm in an area where we're not affected by the fire. And so in the studio, though, I have to keep air going like 24/7. So the interesting thing is I used to be super anal, and this kind of an interesting thing. So I'm a shotgun guy. That is to say, the shotgun mic, and I know that you can actually hear the air coming through the shotgun. Now, just by good fortune, where I'm situated in the room, the air conditioner's over there, so it's kind of behind the shotgun. Even though it will pick up some of the sound coming from directly behind it, it doesn't get it like it's pointed right at it. So the thing is that I used to be just madly anal retentive. I would have nothing going on in the room as I was recording, and I can tell you, tube amps get a little hot. So it's kind of one of the funny things that I love about modeling gear, is you can leave it on all night, not feel guilty about frying the tubes, and it doesn't make the room hot. So, I know you're over there in Hawaii, and you guys get a little bit of heat, so I'm kind of curious how you do that. The interesting thing is that this is the Millennia. There we go. Music and Media HV37. That was the preamp recommended for reamping by Joe Satriani. Because I was like, hey, I'm going to reach out to the expert on this. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I figured if there's anybody who knows the best preamp to buy, it's going to be Joe. And that's one of the two that he recommended from Millennia. And it's a stereo preamp, so I can, I like to, again, once part of me is process oriented, so sometimes I'm like, I can't change this. Sorry, that's me whispering. I can't change the setting, but I can't change the setting, right? It's like, oh, can't touch it. And the thing is that once you get something set in a particular way, until you've actually committed it and got the final version, and again, what I'm doing these days is that I actually videotape the actual take, and then I can edit that stuff together, because, first of all, it makes it way harder, which I'm always like, let me make it harder. Why make it simple? But the other thing is, so this is the best part about this. I actually have to play a song from beginning to end. Go figure. Who does that anymore? So what I can tell you is that it makes you think about music in a very different way. And I love that. I love the fact that I'm like, oh, I'm having to... let me hit the pause button there for a quick second. So one of the things, like that the piece there, I'm not going to play it. But the point being is that there's enough different transitions and the parts are different enough that stitching them together, what I just did was just kind of loop the last measure of one section and the first measure of another, just practicing it. I don't even think with the click, but just so I could practice the transitions, especially since I'm the main guitar part, it's in drop D, and I've got all these bass note movements and this crazy wacky stuff. Like it took me a hot minute to get the chords right, because it was really hard because nothing's in the right location. So you can't really, it wasn't like playing a six string. So the point being is that like looping those individual transitions and then going, okay, now I'm going to play the performance from front to back. That was just such a great thing, because I'm like, oh, right, that's how I used to actually record. And, in those days you could punch in. My whole thing is like, I want to give people the sense, and my buddy Lincoln Brewster talked about this, is he was like, you can hear when a section's been cut and pasted. And if you can't hear it, you can feel it. And even if you don't feel it consciously, you do know it's the same. On some level, you're like, and the other thing is people are suspicious. So I was like, wow, I want to be able to play these things from beginning to end, and I want people to be able to watch the video and go, dang, he's playing that front to back. And the other thing is what it does is it invites people into your world. Like that's a moment of honesty, where it wasn't like, a 15-second, Instagram video. So it's actually like, to in a sense, it is, I don't know, it's a form of performance art. I want you to engage from, because by making the decision to put out another record, I made a decision to become an artist. So now I get a chance to behave like an artist, which means I actually need to play the song from front to back, because sooner than later, I'm going to have the privilege of playing songs live again, which is going to be great. So the point being is that as I'm recording all this stuff, the reamping stuff, I don't spend a lot of time reamping, which is really funny. I kind of like, and it's really, honestly, it's kind of dumb, but so it's funny, Chris, you were a mad reamper, because I remember your post about your new rig, the Synergy stuff. It's reamping heaven or something like that. So I'd be curious to kind of rabbit trail on your tube amp thing, and I'd be curious to so I'm kind of curious whether you're monitoring with phones on and the guitars here in the amp in the room, or kind of how you're doing that. And I guess if you do a reamp, you're not using phones or in-ears, because the guitar will hear a little bit of stuff, but not much. And once the rest of the track is in, you won't hear the click bleeding. And no, there is nothing quite like a real amp. And here's the thing, there's pros and cons of that. A real amp, if you're ever, if you're a JVM person, so I put up Joe's amp, and I said it now. So yeah, it was Joe's amp, because I played through his rig at the last G4 experience, and I have the JVM, and I love my amp, but his sounds better. and they took the JVM and they kind of saturated it, and it's just a great sounding amp. So I found one on Craigslist this guy was selling because I've been secretly jonesing for it, and I was like, well, you want to trade some stuff for it? And finally I was like, wait a second, why don't I just reach out to Joe and just go, look, I'm literally at the point where I'm about to trade some stuff for one of these amps, because I felt guilty about kind of like, hey, Joe, can I borrow your amp? I mean, it's just like, you do not want to wear your welcome out. So I just like, hey, I got to this thing, and I was like, I just figured, why don't I just ask? All you can do is say no, or I can end up with your amp over there. So the thing is, I'm super excited to work with that. There are lots of things I've got in store for that. So I'm super excited about that. But a tube amp will make you work. It'll put hair on your chest. As Jeffrey Scott, a great friend, a great guitar player, touring guy, studio guy, great guitar player, Jeffrey B. Scott. Look him up on Instagram. Okay. Look at you. You're a funny guy. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. How tweet it is. That's right. I love that, Bruce. A tweet amp is a very special thing, but it will make you work. But a good work. Oh, dude. Kurt, the Plini plugin from Neural DSP is probably the best plugin I've ever played through. It's unreal. It's just unreal. Unreal. Chris, that is a great idea. Yes. So the funny thing is, and I actually need to do my research on this. I had heard a rumor, and I've never heard, I think it was just a rumor, but I had heard a rumor that Thomas McLaughlin was actually John McLaughlin's son. Now, I know, it's like, all right, yeah. So I'm going to do a little bit of research there. But I've got some cool guests coming, and I've got a guest invitation that's out there that if it happens, like, I will be like, you'll have to pull me down from the ceiling. All I can say is you'll have to pull me down from the ceiling. That's all I can say. Hey, Mark, what's going on? All right, we met at NAMM this year. Was in the Line 6 booth. Yes, I introduced myself. You're like, hey, dude, what's going on? Said I knew who you were and that I was a friend of Ron RJ. Oh, awesome. Oh, good. Okay. Awesome. Hey, good. Hey. And you poor guy, you're like, I know who you are. You're in the room. I got to say hi or something. I don't know. First of all, thanks. Hi. Welcome. Pleasure to see you. So first of all, whether you're a modeling person or not, it's always cool to go hang out at the Line 6 booth. There's a great vibe in that room. Second of all, the RJM folks, Ron Benelli is one of my favorite people. And the funny thing is how I kind of know Ron is I keep putting a camera, on him or putting him in front of a camera. And he's actually really shy, kind of likes to be in the background kind of guy. So it's kind of almost, in a sense, it's torture. But he's such a lovely guy, and I think he likes me enough that he just doesn't say no, which is lovely. But Ron Benelli is one of the smartest guys. The PBC6X is just a brilliant piece of technology. By the way, any of you that are worship folks, next Tuesday night on the Worship Guitar Show, we've got Nigel Hendroff. So that's going to be at Worship Musician Mag, youtube.com/Worship Musician Mag, facebook.com/Worship Musician Mag. But one of Nigel's rigs, I'm 99.9% positive, was built around the larger PBC, whose name I can't remember. The point being is that their stuff is phenomenal, and there is this guy John Petrucci that some of you might have heard of that also uses the RJM stuff because it's genius and has been genius, and he's been solving problems for guitar players. Like I first heard about it because every flippin' amp manufacturer in the world has a different, not only a different, foot switch, but a different jack on the back of the foot switch. Thanks a lot, guys. So Ron kind of made these MIDI connections so you could kind of use a MIDI switching system in combination with all these different amps and actually be able to put it together. Just a pure genius. Mark, it's a pleasure. Good to see you. Peking duck. Brian, you're hilarious. Thank you so much. Let me not undermine the good-hearted nature of your comment. Thank you. Appreciate it. What pickups do I like? All right, that's a really funny question and a great one. So the interesting thing about this is that for years and years and years, I started off with Super 3s in the bridge of the S540s or the 540Ss, the Virtual 2 middle model, which is a narrow aperture humbucking single coil flavored pickup, and in the neck it was originally the PAF Pro and then the PAF Joe. Okay. So it does on the Vi style guitars, I kind of have a tendency because they come, first of all, look at that guitar. I mean, like, it would be sacrilege to change these out. And this is not the most expensive gem in the world, but it sounds great. Now, I will say this, is I've got my buddy Chris Lewis has kindly been a gear supporter, loaning copious amounts of gear, and he's got a Gem 7V that's been here probably the better part of a decade, if I were really honest. That is a more expensive guitar by at least $1,000. And when I pick up that guitar, I can hear and feel the difference between that and this guitar. That said, if that guitar is stowed away, the Gem 7V is stowed away in a case, and I pick up this guitar, music comes out. Like that melody, that little, this little bit here, hang on. Here we go, hang on. It's got a smokiness. I'm like, whoa. So, the interesting thing is it's all modeling, but the thing that I've learned with the right hand about playing through tube amps is you back off a little bit with the pick, and that smokiness that comes in, I was like, wow, that's a lovely sound. And, the interesting thing is I'm kind of down here on the bottom of the neck, and then I come up in kind of basically the B section, or the pre-chorus, or whatever you call that, and I purposely back off with the right hand. It's an interesting thing as you climb the neck. Traditionally it gets brighter, but what I wanted it to do was kind of sit back a little bit further, not in the time, but harmonically. And I was like, as soon as I did that, I was like, oh. And what was interesting is when I'm working the melody, a little bit of insight there. So I am rambling, but the pickups are a huge part of this. What I'll do is I'll loop each of the sections, because that's how I kind of sit with the melody. And this one, I sat for probably a good 45 minutes coming up with the main melody. And I kind of, unfortunately I did it there and not at the beginning of the show. It's new. But the point being is that there was the first thing that I played that sounded like the kind of the melody that I did with the, if you remember, with the Tom Morello guitar. And I'm like, I'm not playing the same melody. So I sat there and I kind of kept massaging it and twisting it and pulling out the parts that sounded too much alike and pulling them out. Because, the interesting thing is going into making a record. Sorry, I'm talking about making a record, but it's about pickups. It all interrelates. Claiming style, which is about claiming repetition, but not feeling like you're wearing out the license to over-familiarize one dimension of the playing. It's a hard thing to find a balance in. The point being, for the HSH guitars in the S540, which has been my go-to instrument, Gary Brower actually has my black guitar. There's actually a really great photo of Tosin Avasi playing that guitar. It is like one of my favorite photos because he's always playing some, extended range instrument with fan frets and 5 million strings. But he looks so cool playing that guitar, and it's like, I love that guitar. Not a super expensive guitar. But the point being is that has got in the bridge. So I went from the Super 3 and the Virtual 2 middle model and the and the PAF Pro to the Tone Zone, which I love, as well as the Tone Zone S. So some of you may or may not have seen, it's basically a lawsuit era Ibanez, basically a Strat knockoff. And in that guitar, I put in various things, but in the bridge position, I've got a Tone Zone. I think they call it a Tone Zone S. So it's basically, I generally don't go for rail pickups, just kind of not my thing. But as I recall, the Tone Zone S actually is a rail. I have to take a look. Anyway, somebody else will know. But the point being is that sounds great in that guitar. And that was a guitar I used on Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero. And that guitar has been with me a bunch. The main S540, or it's actually a 470, has got the Tone Zone in the bridge, some sort of DiMarzio, middle position, narrow aperture, hum canceling thing designed by Steve Blucher. But the neck pickup is the greatest, with the exception of the Vi guitars where I just kind of go, hey, whatever's in it is going to be in it. That's a PAF Joe. And that pickup is the best humbucking neck pickup ever. Now, Joe has, I think, a new thing. Well, right, because he's using the narrow aperture because of the 24th fret. Sorry, just in case you're new to the pickup thing. Basically, your average humbucking pickup is basically a double coil. That's a wide aperture pickup. A single coil pickup, or a traditional single coil, is a narrow aperture pickup, because what it's saying is that in terms of the way you're picking up the sound of the string, a humbucker has a wide aperture. That is to say, the hole through which it's hearing. Sorry, that was the wackiest thing I've done all day. The hole through which it's hearing the sound is like this versus like this, a narrow aperture. And not that necessarily one is better or worse, they're just different. Generally speaking, narrow aperture pickups are a little bit more accurate. They don't have quite as much width, which means that they have a tendency to be a little bit more scalpel-like. They're clearer is a good word for that, because they're when you think about when you think about the Satriani harmonic thing, which I won't attempt to do, but where he's doing these harmonics, or when you do think about toggling between those little pinch harmonics, they're super close together. So imagine the distance between two coils. I mean, that's a huge amount of variation in terms of where it's hearing the string, right? And when you hit a string, you're not just hearing the fundamental, you're hearing all the harmonic information. So to answer your question, basically I don't touch the Vi guitars. And on the other guitar, my main Ibanez is I almost always will put a Tone Zone S in the bridge and a PAF Pro in the neck. Just ridiculous pickup. Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Melissa gives me outstanding feedback. Just excellent, excellent, excellent advice. Thank you, Chris. All right, Richard. Oh, come on, bring it on. With the playing streams, love them. Thank you. I love you, dude. That is so kind. Thank you. You may want to look at Facebook's recent changes around music experience. If not already, seems complicated. I've taken an approach of using one of my other initiatives to try and get through. Try this and try that, and learning phase and helping. Great guidance as always. With pleasure. With great pleasure. So all right. So here's the deal. I live in a season of busyness, and I think we all do to one extent or another. I am a prolific overachiever, and by being a prolific overachiever, I work 100-hour work weeks. The good news is I have enough inertia that I'm now actually kind of going, I want to take Sundays off. And so because of that, there are certain things that I don't get a chance to digest. I want to serve people. I have goals of what I want to set in terms of being some sort of authority on a large enough range of things that it means that I'm in student mode 24/7. Not for me, but for the people I have the opportunity to serve. And so, and I'm not anywhere close to knowing the things with the degree of knowledge that I want to. The whole Facebook thing is apparently around, and this is speaking and admitting that I'm speaking without the frame of reference, but my guesstimate is that basically they opened up a tip jar. And at the moment that they open up a tip jar for cover bands, they're allowing cover bands to monetize copywritten material which basically means Facebook is hugely liable for ripping off record labels and artists and publishers for their just due. So I think they kind of went, oops, and the thing is that tip jar or not, there is not a mechanism for copyright infringement kind of built into this thing, which is a very interesting thing because on the worship side of things, I have a relationship with a company called Multitracks. And Multitracks has the actual original stems from the original recordings. And Nigel Hendroff, who's going to be on the Worship Guitar Show next Tuesday, is part of this outfit out of Australia called Hillsong. If you're a worship person, you're like, duh. But the point being is that, because of the relationship that worship musician has with Multitracks, I'm in a position where for my worship gear demos, I'm able to use actual stems from the actual recordings. Now, the thing is that I'm going to be very conscious about how I approach doing that on Facebook, and it may simply be a matter of posting those demos on YouTube and then sharing those demos up here and not actually playing along with the actual stems on Facebook. Because it's always good to be judicious, and what you don't want to do is have your channel or your profile yanked. That's not a good thing. So, okay, let's see here. Oh, this is going to be fun. Daniel Parsons. Hey, by the way, I'm seeing a bunch of new people. I am so thankful you're here. Thank you very much. All right, this is awesome. What advice would you give to players who want to buy a cheaper instrument and make some high integrity mods in terms of less expensive instruments and great value parts? Okay, that is a multi-faceted question that I'm going to try and answer with total integrity and honesty, and also kind of with a couple of different perspectives. That my new perspective is, I'm not quite as sphincteronious as I've been up till maybe a month or so ago. An interesting thing happened with these Fender guitars that showed up. The Ibanez folks, I've been with Ibanez for 25 years. And it's an amazing relationship. They're lovely people and they make outstanding guitars. So these Fender guitars showed up, and as a for hire demo person and or just plain a demo person and a live streamer, whatever the heck it is that I do, when you play an instrument that allows you to capture a sound that you wouldn't have been able to capture otherwise, that instrument has value. And what happened is these guitars, these players, they're not Player Series, they're American Original. They showed up, and I was like, oh, this one allows me to do this one allows me to do that. They are basically because they're basically reissues that Fender, the team at Fender now, is making the best reissues they've ever made, and they're just outstanding guitars, and each one allows me to do something different, and so it means that I have a vehicle to go someplace that I wouldn't have been able to go otherwise. That is to say, one of the instruments that's been here for quite some time that they never asked for back is a Squire Jazz P bass. That was like a $300 bass that is, for the money, the best bass in the world. Absolutely outstanding instrument. And honestly, I wouldn't even change out the pickups. Here's where the nuance comes, and I have to be careful how I say this, but I want to be clear and honest. I am a huge fan of the instruments, the lower range instruments that are coming out of Indonesia. I'm just going to say it. I am not anti-Chinese. I find that there are some excellent instruments coming out of China. Phenomenal guitar. Phenomenal guitar. But I will say, in a general sense, I've dramatically preferred the instruments coming out of Indonesia than the ones in China, in a general sense. So that is to say, if you're looking to buy some lesser expensive instruments and change out parts and spend your money there, I would suggest, as you kind of look at the different instruments you're thinking about, see where you can kind of get a chance to go into a store and try them out when and where that's possible. And also kind of go, let me see what's available from Indonesia, and then kind of see if what I said is accurate. Kind of go, let me play, kind of within a company that manufactures in China and Indonesia, and kind of the offerings there. See what you think about the playability. Generally speaking, when I find a company manufactures in both those countries, you'll find that the fretwork's not as good on the Chinese instruments. You'll find that they just don't have as much TLC as the stuff that comes out of Indonesia. I think it's just different. That's all. So that's a great question. It's an interesting. I brought one of my beloved guitars to Gary Brower, and he said, "Yeah, it's an okay guitar." And it was a guitar that I had a huge emotional attachment to, but because of the way I felt about the instrument, it was a part of my arsenal. So like I had a very strong connection with that instrument. So regardless of whether Gary thought it was a great guitar or not, it was a great guitar to me. So that is to say is that if you have a guitar that you put the pieces that you want to put in there and get a chance to experiment with, because ironically, kind of going back to something I said earlier, I wouldn't change out the pickups in this guitar. Again, I talk about, I'm changing things up. But there are certain things like, look, if it sounds great, why mess with it? But what we're talking about here is like we're purposely getting an instrument, like let's mess with some stuff and see what happens. I love that. And what's going to happen is you're going to find some things. Now, here's the one piece of advice I'd have to anybody here. I went off a minute ago about the PAF Joe, best neck pickup. So let me clarify that I will say this, is that if you've got a 22 fret Fender scale instrument, especially an Ibanez, and you're looking for a suggestion on a neck pickup, the PAF Joe is the most amazing pickup I've ever heard. It's just ridiculous. It's got the snap of a Strat with the fullness of a Les Paul. It is the perfect neck pickup, right? So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just, and especially with a whammy bar, it's just like something about that is just magical because, the thing is when you get into higher gain settings, that snap on the top end becomes really, really important. The other thing, Daniel, I'll say this, is that I've become a huge fan of locking tuners. And most of my guitars don't have them. But holy cow, when it comes to string changes and all of the above, I'm a big fan. Great question. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And welcome aboard. Thanks so much for hanging out. Really appreciate it. Oh, Ben Eller. Oh, I love Ben Eller. Don't tell him I've got a bro crush, but I do. It makes me think of Ben Eller. To get this tone, I got out my D&D grunge pedal, and I didn't plug into it. Hold on. It makes me think of Ben. To get this tone, I got out of my DOD grunge pedal and didn't plug into it. Did I miss something? So in any case, doesn't matter whether I did or didn't. Ben Eller is the best. By the way, if you don't know who Ben Eller is, he's a YouTuber. He is a brilliant guitar player. He's got like 300,000 subs on YouTube, and he's a great guitar teacher, brilliant guitar player. He plays with Andy Wood. He's in Andy Wood's metal tribute band, which must be a hoot. Oh, gosh. In any case. All right. Let's see. Do you usually read the instruction manuals for products before starting a review? That is a brilliant question. The answer is yes. Okay, so so I'm just going to give you the honest answer. How about that? In my quest to be an authoritative source of information for people, when I open my trap, I like to talk about this thing, yap to crap ratio. And I realize I can be a little verbose, and I'm learning to just kind of take my passion and express it with fewer words. Give me a year. I will be better at it. But when I'm in this environment, we're just having a conversation, which means I'm just talking the way I would talk, right? So the thing about the owner's manual, one, and you said it from the idea of doing a review, so I'm going to answer it from that thing. When you watch a review about a piece of gear that I reviewed, you're expecting from me, as far as I'm concerned, that I will have put myself in a position where I have done my homework and become an expert on that piece of gear. I can tell you all sorts of things about, the high pass and low pass filters on the top of those. There is basically an XLR in and out. There's the ability that you can basically run through it, so you can monitor it, but you're just passing the signal through them. There's a defeatable tweeter. Actually, they refer to it as a high HFP, a high frequency HFD, a high frequency driver, not a tweeter. Kind of the same thing. But the point being is that I should be able to rattle through the most important things. As if you walked into Guitar Center and I was your salesperson. I'm like, let me tell you about this thing. It does this, it does this. And what's really cool is you can do this and you can do that and you can do that because I've done it. So one, the neat thing about opening the owner's manual, like, and like there's a healthy collection of the paper versions of, that's for the Sans amp over there, and all of that, is it allows me to, first of all, have the best user experience that I can. And when I have an intelligent user experience, instead of fumbling around taking what I think I know about a piece of gear and taking what the manufacturer tells me was important enough to them that they committed it to print it on paper, then I'm actually tuned in. So most of the time, it allows me to make the best decisions that I can about the gear. And in turn, it allows me to be a more effective source of information for people out there that will, as I'm working on building my brand as a gear demonstrator, the mistake that I made in the early days of YouTube, not that it was a mistake then, I did videos on manufacturers' channels and I didn't build my brand. And then I launched a brand called Gear Tunes that is now gone. It's just, it didn't work out. But the point being is we got some good plays there. But the point being is that season ended and here I am. So the idea is, as I'm working on building my brand from the ground up, and I actually love that because I love hard work, and because I've done high play videos on YouTube. I did something for Isoacoustics earlier this year that's got like 85,000 plays. I'm like, I can still swing for the fences. So I'm like, you know what? All it is about regular amount of content in this chair right here. And the great thing about this little setup right here is that this is the pit. I'm now, you're going to see a lot of videos shot right here. So it's just a matter of consistent content and sitting there, remembering how to place microphones, remembering a smart workflow, learning how to massage it until it's right. You don't fake it. You just keep working until you make it. So the point being is that by going into the interesting thing about the Power Engine Deuce Deluxes is that one of the things that's big in the manual is these kind of wet, dry, wet, and kind of secondary uses of tube amps. So as well as a huge range of things for bass, acoustic guitar, so they're extremely flexible. You can also run your track through them. And what I love about these guys, never good when I make that sort of sound. I wonder what's going to happen, because I know I pulled that clip over. They to my ear, sound more like a 412 cabinet, especially for heavier modeling stuff, than anything else I've heard. So let's see. I wonder, I don't know how the audio is routed for this. Hang on, let me just check one thing. Actually, you know what? I'll take you on a little mental version of the journey I'm about to take. Basically, I use an application called Loopback, which basically is like the mixing mixer for audio inside. Good. All right, that should be good then. Audio inside the Mac. And it just, otherwise, and actually I have my buddy Chris Stark to thank. We were on some sort of, I don't know, it was a live stream or something, and I was playing it. He could hear the direct signal, I think it was the Plini plugin or something, passing through. And it's because when you kind of input audio, even though I'm using this fancy pants Apollo interface, the direct signal coming in that was making its way from the interface into Pro Tools was also just pissing all over anywhere that it could be picked up, including just passing on to the live stream. And if it were not for the fact that now I actually do some test recordings, and I would have now caught that. In those days, I didn't do the test recordings. And Chris Stark was kind of like, hey, dude, you got some of that direct signal in there. And he knew I didn't want that. And I was like, thank you. That's a friend. It's a funny thing. I was thinking about this the other day. Who was I thinking about that with? The idea is like, at what point you actually tell somebody like something's wrong. You know, you're actually doing somebody a favor, and most of the time they're like, "I'm so glad you told me." All right, let me get this clip over here, and I'm going to have to test the level here for a second. But this is the Tech 21 Power Engine 60. All right, where's the original video? Sorry, give me a moment. I need to read, and there it is. Bounce files. Which one is this? That's not it. Okay. 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 It's going to be over here. There we go. Audio. No. No. Well, it seemed like a really good idea. Wait, no, it should be in there. Mouse files. No. Great. No, that's the bass. Okay. Well, poop. Oh, wait, there's another one that could be it. Nah. Bummer. Okay. I tell you what. Well, now that I've wasted your time on this, I actually know where I can find this clip. So let me just do that. While I'm talking here and looking for this clip, what I'm doing, there was a box that unfortunately Tech 21 doesn't make anymore. That was basically their take on a dual rec, and that was into this rig, and just the tone was just ferocious, and I was like, holy cow, just really. And so, you know, there's lots of great products on the market. Let's see, what are you? Come on. No, that's just a link to Dropbox. Thank you. Oh, no. Tracking number. Seriously? Oh. Well, that's no fun. That means I moved it in Dropbox, which basically means I'm SOL. Bummer. Okay. Sorry to waste your time on that. Let me just do one last little poke through here and see if I can. Oh, maybe it's here. Hold on just one second. T21. No. There's two of those. Bounced files. No. Okay. Lame. Okay. Totally wasted your time. I'm so sorry. There's a demo with the. Hold on. All right. Now I'm too frustrated. Let me just check my email here real quick and see if I sent it via email. This is because it's that to me was so good. Of course, there was always the possibility that it wasn't even going to be in the email. Hold on. Oh, maybe it's a Dropbox link, though. Give me just a moment. All right. Totally wasted your time. I am more frustrated than you are, and that is really, 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 really annoying. Hang on a second. There's a thread here. Maybe it's buried in a thread, and it may be a Dropbox link. So give me just a moment. Sounds great. Oh, no. There's with the piezo. All right, well, I found a Dropbox link, but that's not the one that I want. It was with the 7-string. Oh. Well, sometimes when you're doing a live stream, you're just supposed to be smart enough to know not to do what I just did. Oh, boy. Okay, yes, manuals, they're great. My AC is cranked 24/7. I bet it is, my man. What's going on, my man? How are you? Doug DeYoung. Is it DeJong or DeYoung? Or is it kind of DeJong or something? Good to see you, mate. Awesome. Thanks so much for hanging out. All right, here we go. With playing live, are you going to use a real amp or are you going to go to do digital? What a great question. I have in the back of my mind been trying to figure that out. I think if my instincts are correct, I'm going to use modeling some sort of Class D power amp and speaker cabinets loaded with Celestion F12 X200. I have a bunch of cabinets. I'm going to be doing something around those speakers very soon, and I have a bunch of cabinets that I basically, I've got them in the original Power Engine 60s, which kind of, it's basically a 112 that's got power built into it, 60 watts. I actually bought specifically for that range of demos. It's a Mesa Boogie 212 wedge. Super rare, but really, really cool. So I don't think I've put them in there yet. And then also I've got two 412 cabinets. So the great thing about the F12 X200 is it's basically a 200 watt coaxial full range live response. So the idea is what they wanted to do was give you the ability to take your modeling sound but have it play back in a speaker that is designed to be put in a traditional guitar enclosure and behave like a traditional guitar speaker. And they sound great. So, I've already spent a bunch of time playing through the Power Engine 60s, but in terms of loading them in these other cabinets, I have not done that yet, and I've got a healthy selection of those speakers here. So if I were to give a guess, I would say in this moment, it's going to be modeling, and it's going to be doing that. And the advantage is, that you're able to have that continuity from night to night to night to night. And I think that is an important thing. That's a great question. I'm kind of curious. How about you? Let me know, please. Put her in the chat there, please. It's a great question. "28 years, three times a week for 28 years. I can't even do that, man. Hold on. 60, 84. Wait, no. Wait. 3 times a week for it. That's, oh my word. 28, that's 28 times 52 times 3. I can't even begin to do that math, and I just failed. So let me ask you a question. Do you show up with that pointy guitar at church and the full stack? That's awesome. Pleasure. Thanks, man. Really cool. That is a beautiful guitar, by the way. My. That got a locking tremolo. Oh, boy. What's going on, Michael? How are you, man? Good to see you. Always a pleasure. Michael is a student of mine from decades past, but always great to be in touch with people. Okay, Brian, what's going on, my man? All right, good friend uses Fractal almost exclusively. It's impressive. However, in some instances, it does lack a certain... I'm reading certain authenticity. They both have their place. So I think with the programming, I think you can get rid of most of the conversation I had this afternoon with somebody who I met at the LA Amp show, and you'll meet him sooner than later. He works for a manufacturer, and he's a guy that he was at this booth, and he still works for this company. And he had this, it was a 410 Marshall cabinet, a Vox Night Train amp, and like a Fender kind of, it wasn't a road-worn Telecaster, but it was something like that. And it basically, this rig that never should have sounded just like Van Halen. I was just like, and he and I instantly bonded. So we've been friends ever since. He's a great guy. But we were talking about, kind of the gap that's getting closer and closer, and kind of what it is. He was talking about the experience of like you've got your back to the rig, it's switching back and forth. Can you tell which one is which? Now, here is the thing, Brian. I will say this. I spent 24 hours moving mics around and dialing in bass tone. I mean, I'm just like, but I love what I ended up with, and I ended up somewhere that had I just gone direct, I would have missed that opportunity, right? And I would have, again, in demoing these guys, fallen short for what I wanted to do for people. So, and I got a chance to use the Sans amp in a really cool way. Again, so for those of you, first of all, bass tone, just buy a Sans amp. Because what's neat about it is that you can go straight in. You can do a blend between the Sans amp technology and the direct signal, a ridiculous amount of EQ, and you can also bring a parallel out. So you can blend and mix whatever it is that you want to do with tremendous flexibility. which I just love, and they sound great live. You know, like the place I spent the most time kind of working with a Sans amp was actually a church. They are the perfect, and guess what? Tech 21 really, like, if we're going to be really honest, started this whole thing. Like, back when I started using Pro Tools 7, 6, the Sans amp was my bass tone. And so, you know, that, and it's just a great sound. So the point being is that I think, one, what you tell yourself is part of it. Like, this sound here is really good. I think to a certain extent, there's going to come a point where people actually go, yeah, there's tube amps, but I like some of the playing experience of being in the box better. There is a certain amount, and this is the conversation that happened this afternoon, and it's a matter of, it's going to, the thing that we're working on is going to be really exciting. It's, like I said, one of the most exciting things that it's actually going to be the most exciting. If it ends up being what I think it's going to be the most exciting thing I've ever worked on. I'm so excited. I guess I'm excited. But the point being is that the idea of the gap getting closer between the two of them, but also there's a whole generation of people that never played the actual tube amps, and they may not actually like the tube amp experience, and that generation is growing. So, you know, or those generations are growing. So it's a very interesting thing where, you know, there's certain things about the fact that I don't run into certain frequencies that jump out. You know, that is to say, when you're playing, all of a sudden you hit some resonant note that the cabinet resonates on, that, you know, it's some anomaly that makes tube amps what they are. Not all the byproducts are good, right? So the other thing is, it may sound good at a particular register, but when you change registers, it doesn't translate. That was actually the thing that I loved about this, is that it smoothed out really nicely on that melody that I played. And, you know, it's just kind of like, this preset, I would never have used it for that song. And it just happened to be there from last night, and I plugged it in. I'm like, I don't know, I'll try it. I was like, you know, in about a half a second, I was like, oh, okay. So the point being is that there is a certain amount where it is, this is the piece of the conversation I forgot a moment ago, is that in many ways, we're so used to this prepackaged, shiny experience that is becoming part of the experience. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's just a thing. So what's neat about that is that, you know, you're used to having it here. The problem is, you know, as somebody that spent, you know, a year touring Europe with Gilby Clarke, and then the United States with Michael Schenker, it wasn't a whole year, but like there was a year of my life where I was touring a lot, 40 shows maybe, you know, and in that experience, I learned an awful lot that you'll never learn in a chair in a studio. Never going to happen. You learn what the real world is like. You get no sound check unless the tour manager of the headlining act is looking out for you. And we were really fortunate that they took really good care of us. Everybody's, you know, here's the deal. They don't care how good you play, because at the point that you're out on the road, you're good enough to be out on the road. What they really care about is when you're not playing, do they just want to throttle you? Do they want to tie you up with duct tape and leave you at a bus stop? You know, that's the stuff that matters. And so, you know, in the process of learning a bunch of things, I also just learned, you know, people just want to be around somebody that they want to be around. But I also learned, you know, it's like you're going from venue to venue to venue to venue. The whole thing is, I was touring Europe with a GT6 and running that into the power amp return of an amp that was in the rider that would be backlined for me. And every show, there was one there that had an effects loop, and that's how I got my sound. And so it was going to be different every night, but I was like, this is cool. It was fun. It was an adventure. And I'm an adventure guy. Life's an adventure for me. So the point being, I'm sorry, let's make it more about you for a second. The authenticity, I don't necessarily know that that's bad. Now, what's not good is when you go, that sounds kind of fake. And all of the gear is good enough, and certainly the fractal stuff is good enough that if you just spend a little time massaging the presets, and sometimes it may be a matter of the player not knowing your guy. Sometimes it may be the preset and the particular instrument. There are times I plug into something, I'm like, that just doesn't go well together. It was stupid dumb luck, or something better than that, when I plugged into this and I went like, oh, there's the sound. I was like, totally didn't see it coming, right? And you know, I would not have been able to do that with a regular tube amp. And I am deeply thankful that I was. You know, honestly, every time that I'm recording something now, I'm in a season, and I will, again, let me not, the reason I'm talking about me is to hopefully inspire something in you. So let me be really clear. I'm in a season where I want to grow more than I've ever grown in my life. I want to learn more. I want to play more. I want to play better. And I want to break out of the rut that almost destroyed the essence of what makes my guitar playing most exciting for me, which is like reckless abandon, finding the new thing. Finding the new thing. I love it. Oh, my word. Jem, my dear friend, we will catch up tomorrow via phone, by the way. What is my favorite amp speaker combo? I love this. So this is a great question. So part of the conversation I had with my friend this afternoon was about kind of like the 5 kind of classic sounds. And when we actually have this event, you'll kind of go, oh, I know what it was. But we were kind of talking about, there seem to be kind of 5 main sounds that people go for, right? There's kind of, traditionally, if you look at an older player, there's going to be a tweed. You know, I'm saying because younger players don't seem to be as drawn to a tweed, and the tweeds were what preceded the black faces, right? So it's kind of even a generation further back. But you know, there's a tweed sound in there, there's a blackface sound in there, there's a plexi sound in there, there's a high gain Marshall sound in there, there's an AC30 sound in there, and then there's subsets of that, like a super reverb, and then the Pro Reverb, and then the Deluxe Reverb. So to answer your question, I'm going to go into some very specific details here because I think that's such a lovely question. I want to give it the full attention it deserves. Now, here is the thing. I'm a modeling enthusiast, but I'm an amp enthusiast. That amp right there is a 1964 Vibra Verb, and that is one of the amps that was an iconic part of Stevie Ray's tone. There were 500 of them made. That's, I think, a CTS speaker. And then the other one was the JBL. I actually prefer the sound of the speaker. It's the original speaker. And that amp combination of, it's a 15-inch, which is kind of like, it was originally a pedal steel amp. That's what, as I understand, they made that for. But I remember being on the treadmill at the gym, listening to Steve Ray, and I'm sorry if you've heard the story before, and I'm going, okay, I know it's in the hands, but how much of it is the sound of that particular... Like, if you plug Stevie Ray into a plexi, he's going to play a particular way. If you plug him into a clean Fender, he's going to play a particular way. And I was like, how much of it is that sound of that amp? And I came back, and the gear page had this used classified thing that I'd never been to before or after. And that amp, this guy had recorded on his iPhone. I'm sorry if you've seen this story, like, you know, too many times. But I heard this crappy iPhone recording and went, there's the sound. What do I need to do to own this amp? It is the perfect Fender preamp, the perfect Fender, the perfect Fender reverb, and the perfect speaker for that circuit. It is perfect. You plug into that amp, Jem, and you'll just be like, you'll be ruined. Just ruined. That amp will ruin you because you'll be like, that's what it's supposed to sound like. Other amps that do that, the Edge Deluxe is here. Great amp. There's a video. If you want to know about the sound of a tweed, there's a video that Fender did, and there's a guy named Justin Norvell, who's the senior vice president of Fender, who is a lovely guy, and he worked with the Edge on that project, and I think Stan Cody did as well. And so basically, it's the Edge, and he's playing through MXR, the pedal, the delay pedal, gosh darn it, the green one. You know which one I'm talking about. It's sort of the Edge, the delay, straight into the Edge Deluxe Tweed. And it's a Tweed, basically a little Deluxe, and the tone, you're just like, oh, it's just a ridiculous sound. So that is a very special little amp. Interestingly enough, the Tone Master Deluxe Reverb is also another amp that I love, and it's a all digital amplifier. I think the speaker in it may be a Celestian, but again, it's basically a modeling amplifier. But the thing that's very special about it is it also has a direct out signal that you can either use a 121 or a 57. That's the internal models, and I think you can also just bypass those and use your own IR inside the box. But the thing about that is that it has basically in standby mode. Again, this is what happens when you read the manual. In standby mode, it basically bypasses the power amp and the speaker, and you're just getting the sound coming out of the back. So you don't actually have to fire up the speaker if you don't want to. There's also, it's not classically power scaling, but you have the ability to change the wattage the amp's running at. So in theory, you're choosing how much of the headroom you get into. That is to say, if I have a tube amp that is this loud, and I turn it up this high, I'm that far away from the total headroom of the amplifier. It's going to start to break up. Well, if I want to get that sound at a lower volume with the speaker on, I can do that. So that's one of the things that amp does. And there are amps like the Rev D20 is also so that, and again, I'm kind of going through my favorite list of amps, so this could take a moment, but it's a great question. The Rev D20 comes with a 112 partially open back cabinet, and the thing is, it's the first, as I understand it, it preceded the PT15. That is to say, it was the world's first IR-loaded production amplifier, and it is a phenomenal amplifier. I did a demo of it. It's on. If you want to hear kind of my take on it, and that was, I kind of did a bunch of different ways in and out with that thing, but it's on Worship. It's on YouTube.com/Worship Musician Mag, and it's just me kind of working with the two amps and trying different things. But the Helix into the power amp return of that is nuts. And it's just, it's the right speaker. That is a Warehouse Guitar Speakers, WGS. And it's I think, no, I'm not going to remember the speaker model because I don't think it's the one that I'm thinking of. But I think it's a 90 or 95 watt speaker, as I recall. So there's lots of headroom on that speaker. So it's not designed to have that speaker break up. But what's neat about it is that the sound of that thing in the room is just great. Especially, the only thing better than one amp is two of them in stereo. The Matchless DC30. A number of my favorite combos, like my Benson, are 112 combos that have the G12H, the Celestion G12H. That is, if I were to look for the best all-around single 12-inch speaker that kind of does the Fender to Vox, Vox to Fender range of things, the G12H is it. It's in more boutique amplifiers than anything else. So it comes stock in the Benson, I forget the model of that, but it's basically the Benson one that kind of does the Fender and the Vox. And that amp is ridiculous. That's what's in the DC30. The thing about the DC30, and you'll have that in your Helix, you have the ability to either run into channel 1 or channel 2 to do the jumped. Channel 1 is a 12 AX7, channel 2 is an EF86. The EF86 is the tube that is most known for the chimey traditional Vox sound. The problem with those is that they are prone to being microphonic. I hope I don't offend anybody if I say the word pissy, but they're flippin' pissy. That said, I've got my hand-wired, 50th anniversary AC30, and that's got a pair of the Alnico Blues, and that's a really special amp. The interesting thing is that most people don't think about this, but Carl Verheyen is a great example of it. It's a great blues amp. You wouldn't necessarily think AC30 and blues, what? Great blues amp. So that does all the chime and the jangle, but that is also a great amp, and it too has a 12AX7 channel and an EF86 channel. And the EF86 is, again, when you're thinking of that vintage Vox chime, that's where you're getting that from. I've got a Super Reverb Reissue that is not my favorite amp. There's a guy by the name of Well, he's actually kind of keeps a low profile. The guy that works on everybody's amps in the Bay Area, and if you think of the San Francisco Bay Area and you think who everybody might be, he works on everybody's amps. He did some work on my Deluxe reverb, and it went from being okay to phenomenal. And so I like a Deluxe reverb a lot with a single 12, and that's got a Jensen in it, a P12Q or P12N or one of those. And then but the Super Reverb, that amp, I love a Super Reverb. The reverb in that amp, unlike the 112 Princeton reverb hand wired that's got a 10, which is one of the best sounding amps I've ever played. That configuration is great. The 410s in a Super Reverb is one of my favorite configurations, but that amp's just not great. It's a 65 reissue, and it's kind of like, if you will, a generation of Fender design team back, and not to slight anybody, but the work that the team there currently is doing is as good as any company in the business on guitars and amps, just as good as anybody. So that amp, ideally what I want to replace it with is a drip edge. 1968, there's one in Craigslist in the San Francisco Bay Area. This guy keep trying to like do some sort of trade with him, but just hasn't happened yet. But for those of you that don't know, a drip edge is basically the era immediately after blackface, where they were still using blackface parts, but it was basically the silverface amps. And there's a little edge around the edge of the thing, of the speaker grill, it looks like kind of like pewter, and that's why they call it the drip edge. But they're basically blackface amps that are actually super cool. The Vi Legacy. So I have I have 4 heads, the Legacy 3s, 2 Legacy 3s, and 2 Legacy 2s, and the Legacy cabinets from Carvin are loaded with vintage 30s. But the interesting thing about those cabinets is the way they are designed is they're very tight. They do not have an excessive amount of low end. More importantly, they do not have a rumbly low end. And for that reason, they are phenomenal. That said, the other head, you asked, is the JP2C Petrucci head, which is, that thing is a flippin' flamethrower. Great clean sound, but the rhythm sound and the lead tone are just ridiculous. These 2 cabinets behind me are the tall recto cabinets. Excuse me. And I usually get this wrong, but your average vintage 30 is not actually a 30-watt speaker. And I keep getting it wrong, but I think they're normally 60 watts, and Celestia made a special vintage 30 for Mesa Boogie for their 412 cabinets and other things, I think, as well. But I think they are 65 watts, so or something like that. But they're a higher wattage thing because you're going to use them like a flamethrower. And those cabinets sound ridiculous. They just like, especially with the Petrucci amp, it's just like especially with the Petrucci 7-string. That sound is like when I'm going for a particular sound, the combination of all those things, that is just undeniable. I also have a Sebago Sound Double Trouble, which is his take on one of the Dumbles, and I'm going to forget which one it is. I think it's the one, one of the ones that Mayer has, as I recall. But those are the most significant combinations. Oh, that's, honestly, it's pretty much everything that's in the room. I don't have a vintage Marshall cabinet. I've got one that's from the early 80s. It's kind of not a classic reissue because it's from the 80s, so it's ancient. But I'm lacking in the 60s Marshall cabinets. Christmas is not far off. Great question. Sorry, but you asked. All right. Oh, that's awesome. That's it. So thanks so much, Headstock Aram. I like your Tech 21 amp demos, and I realize you guys can read, but the point being is if you're on a mobile device and you're aged like me, and I always like to read it anyway. I like your Tech 21 amp demos from maybe 10 years ago or so, too. It was playing different multi-effects processors through the Tech 21. So I still have, so the funny thing is, I still have those Power Engine 60s. those are great for modeling devices. These are the newer versions. These sound a little bit more like a 412 cabinet, but they sound great. I've been really, and the Tech 21 folks are really, really good. Those, thank you, first of all. And that was like the beginning of the Doppler demo thing. That was really, there's a very soft spot in my heart for those amps, and the people, Dale, who I work with very closely there, is just awesome. Thank you. John, oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. What a pleasure. Thank you. Um, thank you. And thank you. Oh, man. The EVHs coming from Indo look great. So I am jonesing on the red, black, and white. What do they call that? The striped series. Jonesing. Russell Keenan, come on. Love you too, bro. You know that. All right. Awesome, 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 awesome. Okay. Wake shop. No comment. Okay. Don't apologize. Ben Eller is always jabbing his DOD grunge pedal. So the funny thing is, all right, I have to just kind of say this. Look, I'm not a big grunge guy. For the reason being is that right around the time that I put out my first instrumental record, shortly thereafter, the whole grunge thing happened. And basically, as an instrumental guitar player, I remember somebody coming into my guitar studio, and I was teaching, and they said something to the effect of like, "Oh wow, that's cool. People don't play guitar like that anymore." And I was like, it was like when I was teaching at Arinda Music, and there was a music, we sold records there, and this kid came in, it's like, "Oh, Paul McCartney, don't they play in Wings?" And I was like, you like, it's one of those moments that you're like, oh, whatever just happened, and it's not good. So that's funny. Ben Eller. So anything grunge is not necessarily at the top of my list. Nothing personal. Oh, awesome. So you went to Andy's guitar camp. So wait. So Chris, was Ben teaching at the camp, or was he just hanging out? And how? And it looked like everybody had a great time. Cool. Awesome, Chris. Way to go. No, that camp had just a bit of talent going on. I'm sorry, in case you guys don't know, Andy had the Woodshed, Joe Bonamassa, Andy, Mark Lettieri, and a couple other people for lack of memory, I'm forgetting. But that's awesome. Ben is a phenomenal guy, and he just needs to release an album, honestly. Okay. An honorable request, yap to crap. We all say stuff that's filler or just pointless, but keeping it succinct and to the point helps the player in the end. That is really sound advice. And, the funny thing is I really, I spent so much time trying to get conversational in this mode that now that I'm conversational, now I got to get less conversational. It's a funny thing, but it's always a growing process. We're man and we don't read manuals or maps, laugh out loud. It's a funny thing. It is really tempting to just jump in there with the gear and start doing it. The problem is that I usually have enough of a time crunch around all the things I'm trying to fit in that, like, I'm at the point where I actually can't man it and just go, I don't need a flipping manual. That's why they call them manuals. Men aren't going to read them. Hey, what's going on, Nicholas? How are you, man? Good to see you. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Mike, all right. I'm using the Axe IO, but I have 2 sets of monitors. What is a good monitor controller? Okay. Great question. I have not used either of them, but PreSonus makes a couple of different monitor controls, as does Mackie. My suggestion to anybody that's out there, but especially for you, Michael, would be to go on to Sweetwater. And this is how when I'm doing a gear review, it's my second resource after a manual. I go on to Sweetwater, I look at the number of stars, I read the reviews and I see who it is that's using it and how they're using it. I also pay attention to the 1-star reviews because most of the time it's somebody with a little bit of an axe to grind, so to speak. But there's always a bit of truth in there. It's kind of like the person that's kind of like leaves the snarky comments about like, dude, you need to tune that thing when you actually played one note out of tune, or I misnamed which Petrucci guitar I was using in the Mesa Boogie Cab Clone IR demo. It's like the only comment they had was like, it's a Petrucci in. I'm just like, but if I'm going to say it's a particular model and I don't know my own guitar, it was an important learning point of like, all right, be accurate, right? I mean, here's the thing. It was a whiner, immature thing, but it was a good takeaway for me. It's like, you know what? Make sure you've got the model name right. As I look over at the PRS guitar, which I named in my demo for it, they ended up on Worship Musician. No, Doppler's Gear Garage, or Doug Doppler on YouTube. I don't remember where I put that demo. I think I must have put it on my page or my YouTube. But it's the PRS SE Hollow Body 2 Piezo. That name, holy cow! It's just like, so I put last time I misnamed it. I put the 2 before something or other. In any case, so I would strongly suggest checking those out. Mackie makes great stuff. The funny thing is I bought my Mackie 1604 mixer right around the time that we first met, or something close to that. So Mackie has been in the game a long time. The PreSonus folks are also really good, as I recall. Each one of them have 2 different monitor controls, so you can switch between your sets of monitors and have the big knob, right? And the other thing that you want to look for is a feature called dim, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But for anybody out there that's not, it basically makes it so when you've got this one big knob, you can set it such that you kind of have a higher and a lower level that you can monitor at. It's really convenient because, I like to monitor at quieter volumes and louder volumes because you'll hear stuff at different things. And arguably, when you ultimately want to test a mix, you want to listen to it quiet. But as I'm massaging things into place, I find that I turn things up and all of a sudden I'll hear in the full volume of things, I'm like, oh, that note right there. Sometimes when things get quiet, there's a thing called the Fletcher-Munson curve, where basically the mid-range sounds different than when it's loud. And that's why they have a loudness button on stereos, or for those of us that used to have stereos. And basically it meant that when you were listening to things quieter, you press the loudness button and it would give you that bump. So the point being is that when I'm listening to things at a louder volume, though, sometimes you're more immersed in the sound, and so the level of the sound is louder, and you can hear the layers a little bit better, especially with the volume that somebody here has played music at. Oh, Larry Mitchell, dude, I owe you an email. So sooner than later, Larry Mitchell is going to be on this show, and I cannot wait. Talk about a guy that get amazing tone in the box. Well, first of all, every time. So the first time I heard Larry Mitchell play, sorry, Larry, if you're still here, was at the NAMM show. He was at the NAMM booth. I found a cat. Larry, I've got to, mate, did I send you that? So I found the Ibanez catalog. I don't think I was with Ibanez yet, but it's you in the Ibanez catalog with the cowboy hat. So, but I have this vivid memory. He was playing through this Mesa Boogie quad, which I must have one of those, and I don't. But he just had this awesome tone. He was playing his butt off. He's just got ridiculous time, great intonation, brilliant player, great feel, great chops. Everybody loves him. But when it comes to playing through the FM3, I think is the latest. He's just ridiculous tone, and in combination with the H9, just it's just kind of like it's all the goods, all the goods. Yes, ridiculous player, ridiculous. I embrace both tube and digital, but there is a mojo with a tube amp, absolutely. Great thing today is I can merge both with reactive loads and cab modeling. So that's an interesting thing. Is that doggies? Uh, that didn't mean I wanted more barking. The whole thing about, well, what do we have here? The 16 ohm Captor X. Do we have a demo coming? Yes, we do. So I've got the 16 ohm and the 8 ohm. So the neat thing about the two of those is that it means that I can set up an A/B rig between one of the Fender amps, which is traditionally 4 or 8 ohms, and then one of the Marshalls that traditionally likes to sit at 16 ohms. So it means that I'm going to be able to kind of do some fun stuff and try some different cabinets. I should say different IRs and various cabinet things. So I'm really excited about that. So yes, the ability to mix and match is really, really cool. And we live in an exciting time, really exciting time. It's the other 22 hours of the day that make for a good experience on the road. So Larry Mitchell is a genius. One of the things that perhaps we'll talk about when, and he has said that he will come on the show, so I'm excited about this, is that, he has mastered the art of making a living as a guitar player in this day and age, which is a really, that takes ingenuity, talent, integrity, and the understanding of how to bring people what they want. I think, as if you and I were to think about our ideal fan base, then we think about, well, what is everything that I could do to bring them the experience that they want? That's where he lives. That is an uncanny gift. The funny thing is the guy that comes to mind is Slash. Oddly enough, I wouldn't normally think of Larry and Slash, except for that Slash does a really great job of giving people the goods, right? And the great thing is that, Larry delivers the goods every time. I've never heard him play a wrong note. Just ridiculous. And it is the other 22 hours. And honestly, if you're having a crappy time for the other 22 hours, it makes for most of the time a not great stage experience. What's great is when you're having a great time being out traveling and being able to do this thing and see a different city every time you play. It's a really special thing. It is one of the greatest experiences on earth. Now I'm gonna burst a few bubbles here by saying this, and this is one of the things that I learned on the Gilby Clarke tour, is that having played clubs for decades, first tours have a tendency to be, you wake up one day and go, I'm basically playing the same club that I played at home. Which is to say, you begin to realize on your first tour, usually, you're just playing venues that are exactly like the same venues you've been playing at home. You're just in different cities. So the point being is, you're like, if you've been fortunate enough to play urine-stenched, smelly clubs and bars, there are lots of them, at least there used to be, all over the world. Now, that said, I'm not diminishing the experience because the experience is amazing. But I remember just being in, I think it was Ireland or Scotland, and just kind of going, this is just like the Stone, but I'm in Ireland now. And it was just kind of like, okay, this is cool. And the good news is that, it kind of gets back to Richard's comment about the live streaming thing. And, Larry is honestly, Larry, just so you know, you were a huge source of inspiration in terms of the live streaming thing. And, the funny thing is Melissa had said, you need to reach out to Larry and just, he gets an amazing sound. He's got such a great presentation. And the thing is, what I didn't want to do, and I know you would be like, dude, you're nuts, was kind of like, Larry, favor time, blah, blah, blah. And, so the thing is that you have been owning this medium really, really well. And I think I can say, though it's not with inside information, but I would say with a strong degree of certainty that as Satriani and Vi have gotten into the live streaming thing on, kind of the here I am, I'm streaming, my strong intuition would be that they had spent some time watching what you do. And I certainly have. But the thing is that I didn't want to kind of go, can you show me the ropes? It's just, I didn't want to insinuate myself in your world that way. But dude, terms of having ridiculous sound, great personality, great streams. Yeah, that's the man. Um, Boom. There we go. Amen, Larry. I love it. Michael Fox, what's going on, my man? Have I had a chance to mess with the Boss GT1000? If so, what's your opinion? Okay. So, great question. The Boss GT1000 is here. I have not given that the head to toe attention that it will be getting soon, because it's a very, very important unit. It's Boss's flagship in that world. As you may have heard me say before, I toured Europe with a GT6. I used GT8 on. Not only did I tour Europe with the GT6, new instrumental. Virtually every lead tone on that entire record was done with the GT6. The rhythm tracks were cut with a TSL 100, which is a horrid amplifier, which is now gone. I apologize if I've insulted anybody, but if you don't own a TSL 100 and are thinking about buying one, don't. JVM 410S, great amp. The JVM 410S is the amp that I wanted the TSL to be. Enough said. So I have a dual rec Road King version 1 and then the TSL. Those were the amps that I was using for the rhythms, but all the melodies and the leads were the GT6 direct. Unless, like, what was that? 2000, I don't know, 8, something like that. So, I've been hanging out in the modeling world for a long time. So Boss does great stuff. I took that GT6 on tour. It was great having all those sounds in there as I went to tour the globe and just got to be able to get. I mean, here's the thing: all the sounds that you used on your record, at your foot, or at your feet. That's just ridiculous. And one of my favorite. Sorry, if I repeat myself, but one of my favorite Guitar Hero moments was I played on. I did 2 versions of Wrathchild by Iron Maiden, of course, and there's this wah wah solo that's just awesome. And so my upstairs studio here kind of overlooks the front yard, and I'd been tracking, because the Guitar Hero sessions, there was a lot of work and it came quickly, and when you got a deadline, you don't miss it. And so part of the prerequisite, by the way, one of the reasons I'm a kind of a dyed-in-the-wool Pro Tools person, is to get hired for that gig, you had to be Pro Tools compliant, ready to go, own it. So I'm tracking the wah-wah solo for Wrathchild, and the sun's coming up, and it's kind of dawn, but it's this foggy moment, and the sun's trying to peek through the fog, and it was just it was awesome. And I'm so excited to share that moment with you, because it was like Melissa's asleep, it's 6 a.m, but I'm having this rock and roll moment, recreating as best I could this iconic guitar moment. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And that was the GT8. That was such an amazing GT experience for me, that that was one of my favorite. If somebody said, all right, Doug, run through your top 10 great favorite musical moments, kind of anything, roll with it, that would be one of them. That was just an iconic moment. It was just so much fun. That sound, the dawn, and so the 1000, great sounding stuff. And the guy, Jeff Slingluff, the guy that was behind the HD500 and the HD500X, now works at Boss. He's the guy that did Wazoo Tube Amp Expander. So that is part of his legacy. He also did the DL4 when he was at Line 6. The guy's a genius. Literally a genius. Great stuff. So that will be getting lots of appropriate attention, and I'm hoping to get the Boss guys onto the show here sooner than later, which means there will be a ton of demos for that specifically, and presets available when I open up my for sale presets. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Brian. Carbon copy. That was the edge pedal. Thank you. He's my doppelganger. I love it. There we go. Pointy Jackson, no amps, IEMs, and a big pedal board. I love it. What are you using? What are you using on the back side of the pedal board to go front house, or is it some sort of HX stomp? Let me know. Okay, here we go. Love it, 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 love it. With regards modeling versus tube, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. Only 3 factories making tubes, I believe, in China and Russia. Quality is not what it used to be. So this is an interesting subtopic of the conversation, which is, so you ready for it? All right. DOP tip. What if I could like hashtag, or is that just totally stupid? DOP tips. Oh, that sounds bad. Okay. Won't be doing that. Okay, so Mason Marangella from Vertex, what he actually has gotten in the habit of doing, I won't steal his thunder, although he said it on a show that I did with him, is he harvests certain pieces of gear that are not guitar related for vintage tubes. And they're pieces of gear that nobody wants. And so he can get them cheap, and they've got all these lovely vintage tubes. My guess is people are going to start buying unwanted tube amps that have good tube sets in them for the tubes, putting them not good tube sets in them, and flipping them. That would be something that would probably be a good idea. I actually have the VT1000 tube tester that Orange did. That was really cool. Rich, to answer your question, if you're still on here, actually, you didn't ask this per se, but when the VT1000 came out a decade ago, I was working for Orange. We did a live stream from NAMM that had a ton of traffic on the VT1000, which is a tube tester, of which there are very few tube testers in the world where you're basically able to do a couple of very important things with your tubes. One is you can actually measure how hot they are, and you can also kind of, if you've got a tube that you like, measure how hot it is, but also see if over time that tube is on its way out. So the VT1000 was really cool. Harvesting tubes from crappy amps that have good tubes is probably a thing that you might want to look into. It's a great point, Mark. Thank you for that. Really, yes. Poopy tubes suck. What's going on, Tony? Good to see you, my friend. Hope all is well in your neck of the woods. Well, hello to you. Mesa is bomb. Absolutely. Great to see you as well. What a funny way to have a conversation. Also, okay, let's see. I'm running through an ISO box with a vintage 30. It sounds cool. Awesome. All right. Michael, great to see you. Thanks. So I'm saluting you, but you're gone, but I'm still saluting you, okay? Anything Doppler's great. Look at you, Tony. Love you, bro. 68 Super, that is. Ooh. Stay focused. There we go. You're having fun there. Oh, Dale at Tech 21 is awesome. I absolutely agree, Mark. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, here we go. Okay. So Ben played bass for Andy's set. The Kenny Wood Band. No clinics, but he hung out for the whole weekend. I also had the opportunity to... You know, it's something when I stop in my tracks and I'm speechless. I had the opportunity to play Joe's 59 Les Paul Lorelei to his Dumble Overdrive Special. Scary holding somebody else's $300,000 piece of gear. Hey, it was an awesome camp for sure. That is awesome, dude. What a great, wow. Yeah. So like, again, you know, that's one of those moments that you're like, won't be forgetting that anytime soon. That's awesome. Oh. Yes, Larry is the tone master. He is awesome. Bronica, what's going on, man? Good to see you, my man. Good to see you. What's going on? You and I need to do a little phone call. Phone call. Be great. Hi. Awesome. With pleasure. Let's get that GT1000 up and running. Absolutely. Ruby Tubes, guys, they do really good stuff. And that was what was going into all the orange amps back in the day. And my guess is they're still doing it. So I've had really good luck with them. And so I don't know whether they harvest tubes and put their logo on them, but they have to fit a standard to do that. I think that's what they do, but I don't know for a fact, Carlos. Stu Sweatman, you'll never believe what happened. So my dad had a house in the country which we're putting on the market, and I was going through, and guess whose Mo Jam cassette I found? So I brought it home. It's here, and I have Stu Sweatman is an old student of mine, and I don't know, 90s, something like that. And so he did this thing called Mo Jam, which is jamming on modes, which is really cool. So I always thought that was such a great name, actually a phenomenal name. And I was like, should have thought of that. In any case, I ran across that cassette. I should have messaged you. My apologies for not being more proficient in my communications. Way to go. Pedal board to Avium head, and then splitting the original signal Avium 360 in-house. Not sure what the tower of amps are. Okay, cool. All right, so let me see if I've got this right, because you're talking about Avium. Sorry, for those of you that don't speak worship, basically Avium is the company that Behringer then kind of came along with the P16M, I think. But it's basically a headphone / in-ear monitor distribution system. And so lots and lots of churches use these Aviums, and there's basically like a distribution thing, and then it goes to an individual headphone mixer with 16 channels. And that if you're not careful and you're not using wireless in-ears, you go wandering across the stage, and they go, I've done that more times than I care to remember. In any case, are you using any kind of speaker modeling before you go in front of house? Cool. Awesome. So I have not. So Stu, to answer your question, the Kemper here is here on an extended loan, and next Tuesday, that sounds awfully soon, on the Worship Guitar Show, we got this guy, Nigel Hendroff, coming on. And earlier I mentioned multi-tracks, but Nigel has a huge range of Kemper profiles and things that he's done for the Kemper. So between now and Tuesday, I will be learning an awful lot about Kemper. So as of right now, it's been sitting here unused. Awkward. Great question. Yes, sir, we do. Awesome, Veronica. Looking forward to it. Very much so. Yep, it was the 90s. That's awesome. All right, so, and it was great, by the way. So that kind of gets us through our question list. At 8:25, we are 2 hours and 25 minutes into this, and you folks are phenomenal. I just want to thank you. I'm going to get a little bit of food. I have a long day ahead of me. I have a live stream that I'm hosting for Gateway Worship tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you're not doing anything, they have a new album, and we're kind of debuting singles from the album and interviewing the songwriters. It's going to be over at Facebook and YouTube.com respectively /worship musician mag. If that's your thing, I'm not pushing that on anybody, but that's what I'm doing at 10 a.m. Pacific tomorrow, which means I've got to get up and just get everything set up for that live stream then, which means I need to get a good night's rest. But I love being able to do this with you guys, that is. And this was really, 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 really cool. Oh, there we go. Hang on. Wait. All right, there we go. The head rush is the main brain. Got some pedals sprinkled in that I can add when needed. There we go. Thank you for that. Good. I would have lost sleep over that. It's like, what cabinet modeling is he using? How do you like the head rush? People who have head rush love it. So I have not had a chance to try it, but I'm looking forward to it. All right. So that said, got some guests lined up, getting ready to bring into this thing. So we haven't done the guest thing here for a while. Larry Mitchell will be absolutely one of them. And there's another request that's out that is going to be a very interesting thing. So in any case, I want to wish you a great night. Thank you so much for hanging out. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Hey, John, what's going on? Hey, good to see you. Thanks for all the good vibes and everything. Much appreciated. We'll be back here next Wednesday night at 6 p.m. I want to again thank you for hanging out. Have a great week, and just keep playing and have fun with it. Modeling tubes, it's all groovy and it's all fun. And thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I have the best time doing this, and I know it's like I'm yakking to a camera, but I'm not. I'm talking to you, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to just hang out and do this. So all I can say is it's only going to get better, and I'm really looking forward to kind of taking this journey together. So thanks again. Have a great week. Cheers. Oh, and for all the people that wish me happy birthday, thank you. Really appreciate it. Cheers.